It's interesting because you highlighted the word addiction. I always say that the safe driving app for me is also addicting, but in a positive way, because when I think about violating the speed limit or, getting too close and aggressively braking or, cornering, I just know it'll blow my score. So I'm really cautious to make sure I stay above a 90. And for me, it's more about the safe driving, but it's also an insurance benefit.
I'm Art Blanchford, and this is Life in Transition, a podcast about making the most of the changes we're given. As a married father of 3 teenagers, a longtime global business executive and adventurer, I've been through hundreds of transitions in my life. Many have been difficult, but all have led to a depth and richness I could never have imagined. You'll get to hear all about them on this podcast so that together, we can create more love and joy in our lives, no matter what transitions we are going through. Well, welcome back to Life in Transition. I'm really excited to have a friend and business colleague from the past with me today who's also on a wonderful mission, Steve Kiefer. Steve retired about a year and a half ago as president of GM International and now as chairman of the Kiefer Foundation, which is driving a super valuable message, which we'll get to hear about in this podcast a little bit farther along. So Steve, very excited. Big welcome to the Life in Transition podcast.
Great. Well, great to see you, Art. And thanks for inviting me to have this discussion on a really important topic. So great to be here.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, I'm going to jump right in. And the question I start with every time with guests is, what has been one of the highest impact, one of the most meaningful, maybe difficult, profound transitions that you have been through in your life?
Yeah, I wrapped up a 40-year career in the auto industry about a little over a year and a half ago when I retired from General Motors. And there were probably a number of really interesting transitions throughout my career, whether it was going from a hands-on engineer to a leadership position, or going to international sites and running international businesses, or running supply chain for General Motors and getting a chance to meet folks like you and the other 20,000 suppliers that General Motors has. So I could probably call on a number of those, but by far the biggest transition is the one that I went through when I retired. I really had a lot of soul searching, but I'm going to talk a little bit about the Kiefer Foundation and our mission. But as I was wrapping up my career at General Motors, I was realizing I couldn't do justice to the General Motors job and still fulfill my new life passion, which is bringing an end to distracted driving through the Kiefer Foundation. And that really has been, the most important and probably the most rewarding transition that I've been through in my life.
Wow. I know that's saying a lot. And I think, I have a big focus right now actually on midlife transition. I have a lot of groups going on that. And there's a big step with retirement, and to have that clear purpose. Like, I loved how you said I couldn't do justice to my new purpose and my job at the same time. So I chose my new purpose. And I think it's really a wonderful testimony, and the energy I see that you have in retirement comes from that purpose. And it's wonderful that you were pulled into retirement and not sort of pushed into retirement, in a sense. That so many people, I think, lose purpose in retirement. So I think it's a great lesson to show, what retirement can be like. From that transition, maybe before we jump into some other big ones you've had, what is the one thing looking back now in a year and a half that you've learned from that transition into retirement? What's the one takeaway that you feel like you have from that?
Well, I would say that, this work that I'm doing in the foundation, and we'll get into a little more details on what we're trying to do, but a very large portion of it is legislative work, which is trying to get laws passed in each state in the country to make it illegal to hold a cell phone or a mobile device while driving an automobile. So we've been successful now in getting that done in 29 states. Of course, these are state laws, so we have 21 more to go. And
but congratulations on that, though, Steve. Getting that done in 21 states. I mean, of course, you have a lot of teams around you, but you being the tip of the spear, that's amazing. And congratulations.
Yeah, it's kind of shocking because if I told somebody about it, and often I talk about it all the time, and people, first thing would be, well, I thought it was already illegal. Many people think in every state. And then, the next question is, why wouldn't everybody want to do that? It's just common sense. You should be focusing on the road, or as we say, just drive. So what's been kind of amazing is how much pushback and how difficult it is to do something that is so, common sense, so should be non-controversial. Yet I mentioned Michigan, and it took us 5 years to get Michigan done. And that was with the full support of the governor, right from the start. And it still took us 5 years. So, I think perseverance is always important. But I would just say, when you move from a professional career with an organization as large and capable and amazing as General Motors, and you can get anything done anywhere in the world very quickly because you've got thousands of people working for you. Transitioning to something where, I'm kind of the chairman, but also the maintenance crew and everything else in this board. So trying to do a lot of this stuff yourself and trying to influence people that just don't work at the pace of industry. And I'm talking about legislative folks. So that's probably been the biggest lesson, is just you have to have some patience and perseverance to get through this. And it's really interesting to get, people to do things for you that don't really work for you. I mean, we have a lot of volunteers, and you do need to take a little different approach when you're getting people to do things for you when they've got full-time jobs and don't have unlimited time, but they have a passion for the cause. So those are probably a few things that I would take away from this last year and a half.
Awesome. And this difference of how you lead as a boss versus how you lead from influence or from the side, what have you seen? What have you had to do differently to be influential without, with politicians or with volunteers instead of as the leader of a big organization? What have you noticed that you've had to change yourself? What transitions have you had to make?
Yeah, I would say that, first of all, it's probably getting people on board and supportive and even aware of the mission. So, of course, I'll just mention it now. Of course, our mission is to bring an end to distracted driving and all associated crashes and fatalities. And this is in memory of my son, Mitchell, who was killed by a distracted driver a little over 7 years ago. So I think that telling that story and really connecting it, it's painful. Sometimes it's surprising how I can tell the story unemotionally these days, but it's always painful to tell the story. But you hope that when you tell the story, somebody can put themselves in the same position and imagine what it would be like today to get the phone call that their child has been killed. And I think once you make that connection, then you can really move on to many people will tell me, what can I do? How can I help? Where do I donate? And as I always say, donations are great. We can always use some money to get done what we're trying to do. But even more important is getting, the awareness and getting the influence of people. I often said when we were in various states trying to get the laws passed, I'd rather have 100 letters to senators and representatives than $100. Because those letters really do help as you're trying to influence, legislators in some of these states.
Wow. So for our audience that maybe doesn't know, take us back a little bit. What happened with your son, Mitchell?
Yeah, so it was, like I said, a little over 7 years ago. It was September 19th of 2016. Mitchell had just finished his high school career. He was on the state championship hockey team at Detroit Catholic Central. He was the goalie on the team, and they had this amazing spring. He had an amazing summer of 2016 as a Cutco knife salesman, setting the company's sales record of $52,000 worth of Cutco knives in a 3-week period. I mean, just some amazing things. I was just watching his video this morning, which is on our website at mkiefer.org. But and then we moved him up to Michigan State at the end of August. So it was a beautiful Monday morning in September. Dry roads, great weather, sun was out. No reason for any kind of traffic crashes. Traffic slowed down. Mitchell slowed down, and unfortunately, the young lady behind him was distracted on Snapchat and rear-ended Mitchell on I-96, headed just about 15 minutes from East Lansing. Rear-ended him and drove him across this very narrow strip of about 52 feet of grass into oncoming traffic, where he was hit by a truck with a big trailer and killed instantly. So that really, of course, changed our life forever. And again, it's sometimes surprising how unemotionally I can tell the story, but the day, my memories of that day just come back all the time. The frantic call that I got from my daughter that, something that happened to Mitchell, and, my heart sinks as I think about it. And, it obviously it changed us forever. And right at the time that the world will never be the same, because, someone that you loved and tried to protect, all their lives is now, at least in this life is gone. So, so that was that was the impetus for all this. But then, we in the week or so following Mitchell's crash, here I am, a car guy. I know the dangers of impaired driving and distracted driving. But I can also admit that I was as guilty as anybody on distracted driving. I often say I'm a recovering distracted driver. I was proud in the summer of 16 to drive a brand new Corvette. I could steer with my knee. I could drink coffee in my left hand, and I could hold the phone on the dash and quickly glance at text messages, because I knew it took 4.9 seconds to process a text message when you're looking at it. But I knew if I put it on my dash and did it real quickly, I could do it in 2 seconds maybe. And this is kind of the efficiency in me. And we all thought we were so important and always had connected. And so, once this happens to you, you realize this is just silly. There's nothing that's that important. And when you're behind the wheel of an automobile, focusing on the road, and as we say, just drive is just so important. So, the stats were just incredible, because I started looking into it, of course, and found out that, obviously we're not alone. There's the stats say that 10 people every day in this country are killed by distracted drivers. And then when you start to research it, you find out that it's so underreported because it's very difficult. People aren't admitting it. Mitchell's crash was not even classified as a distracted driving crash. It just, it's in the forensics were very clear that it was. But, at the time of the crash, I think they probably asked the young lady that hit him, and she probably didn't admit to it. So the reality is, most professionals, most law enforcement folks, most insurance companies would estimate the number to be closer to 50 people per day that are killed by distracted drivers. So, when you think about that, you just think, today there's 50 families that are going to go through what we went through, and their whole life will be changed forever. It's just for a senseless text or Snapchat or email or something. So it's something that we just have to get that message out and let people know that we've got to do something to change the behavior.
And if it's 50 per day, that's more than half of the fatalities in the United States by car crashes in the year.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right.
So it's pushing up on 20,000 deaths per year by distracted driving. And like you said, that could even be still more underreported, because even people looking down at the radio or something that, we used to hear about before there were cell phones, that's still a version of distracted driving.
Yeah, that's right. And I think, although, one of our real trusted and important and valuable partners is the Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, who, kicked this stuff off back in the 80s. And, I would say that, impaired driving, especially now with the legalization of marijuana in a lot of states, is becoming still is a problem, and is not going away. But it has declined quite a bit. If I look at like the cultural norms, I know all the young people, my children and all the young people I know, would not even think about driving a car while drinking. And they've got so many alternatives with, Lyfts and Ubers and so on. However, people don't think twice about, staring at the phone when they're driving. So we're trying to make it clear that, the data says that looking at your phone for 5 seconds is actually worse than being impaired, believe it or not. Right. So we're trying to make sure people understand that, that it's as bad or worse than impaired driving. And we have to make it just socially unacceptable to be holding a phone or looking at a phone. So the laws are the first step, but then, we just got to continue to change behavior.
Yeah. And I remember when we were working together at the time when Mitchell was killed, and I loved what you said there, is like, it has become, especially in young people, socially unacceptable to drink and drive or drive impaired. Yeah. And that we need to get the same level of socially unacceptable standard norm on, using a phone. And one of the things that, I love that my kids are fully bought into that, right? In order to have a parking permit at our high school here, you have to take a distracted driving course, and they will also give tickets. Anybody coming into the school zone or onto property that is seen on their phone while driving, they will lose their parking privileges. So my kids are like,
love to hear that, because
fully on board with that. And they're very, their cords in their car are this long.
Wow.
So they can't pick up their phone. Right?
That's great.
And they're really aware of that. So amazing story. And I remember when it happened, and man, my heart broke. I couldn't imagine.
Yeah,
I haven't told or heard the story as often as you have, but I think about losing one of my 3 kids the same age as Mitchell is, my oldest, or would be. And I can't imagine. And I remember thinking at the time, I was amazed by how you continued on in life at that time, and then to see you turn it into something so horrible, to turn into something that's really going to prevent that for thousands and thousands of other families will not have to live through what you live through because of the work you're doing. Kudos.
It's that was almost a big, well, it certainly was a transition of a different sort, but I do recall that first month after losing Mitchell. I can distinctly remember sitting in his grave alone, just thinking about this and thinking, I need to put all my energy into making sure this doesn't happen to anyone else. And I actually contemplated leaving General Motors at the time just to dedicate myself to it. As you know, at that time I was running global purchasing and supply chain, and the outpouring of support from our subset of our 20,000 suppliers was just amazing. And I think in most cases it was always for the right reason, but there might have been some folks that were doing it for business purposes. But regardless, I think people were definitely engaged and supportive, and it just dawned on me that I was probably more effective as a General Motors executive speaking about the cause than I would be as a retired person. So that's really why I stayed with General Motors, and I just got General Motors has just been amazing throughout the weeks and months after it happened. But even today, the General Motors government relations team are very active with us in 14 states with these laws passed. So I can't say enough about the support that GM gave me during the issue, allowing Mary herself, allowing me to retire at a relatively young age to focus on this, and then to make the commitment to continue to fight with us on changing these laws. So that's really been rewarding for me.
Yeah, no, I was very impressed with that at the time as well. To see the way that GM rallied around you and picked up the flag next to you. It's really, really impressive. For a lot of people think big corporations don't have any soul. I saw a lot of soul there, and was really impressed with the leadership of GM at the time and the way they supported you. And I'm glad to hear they still support you even after your retirement. So that's amazing. How is it going? How do you feel about, this big transition, which is really, they say it's retirement, but it's really, going from, a business career to a purpose-driven career, I'll say, a purpose-driven life. How do you feel that it's going? How is it working for you in your personal life? How is it working for you in getting your mission across? I mean, you've said 21 states, which is already, or 29 or 21, I don't remember. 29 done.
21 to go.
Obviously, that's amazing, in just short 7 years here.
Yeah, I would say it's going very, very well. I can't think of many things that could be better in this last year and a half. As I retired, I've done a lot of work for the foundation. I probably spend, at least half of all my days doing, whether it's, phone calls or setting up meetings or participating in meetings or full days going to conferences to speak on the topic. Because there's no shortage of organizations that are like-minded that are trying to do the same thing we're trying to do. So, I mean, that piece is rewarding. It could be a 24/7 job if I let it. So I have to sort of manage that to not be totally overwhelmed by it. But I would say that we've recently made some brought some new people into our foundation that are really helping us with strategy and structure. We're just a small crew. We're sort of 5 board members and myself, and we've done some amazing things with that small group, but we're trying to expand that a bit. We just launched a new website at mkiefer.org, so that's all been refreshed, and can encourage your listeners to take a look at that. And the 3 pillars that we're focused on, first is awareness. So we're all about trying to spread this message. And of course, you probably saw a couple of years ago, we launched this Just Drive campaign, which I always pulled this up, but this was
I have signs in my car. I drive a lot, and I have those stuck in between my seats. So it's right there and handy, and I can, put it out or have my kids put it out if there's somebody that's on their phone next to us.
That's great. Well, as you know, we launched that 4th of July weekend a couple of years ago with Tom Brady. He did the first video, and as I've said, I brought that video into the leadership, into one of our leadership meetings at General Motors, and I showed it to our senior leadership team, which is about 15 of us. I showed the video right after 4th of July weekend, and I said, I've got more of these shirts if anybody's willing to do a video. And Mary Barrow was the first one to the front of the room, said, Steve, give me a shirt. I'm doing a video. And there's an excellent video from her on our website as well. So, we've been very fortunate to be able to spread the awareness message. I think that's going quite well. Our second pillar of technology, I honestly believe that, and as I often say, I think the cell phone has really been the cause of the sort of exponential rise in distraction in the vehicles. I mean, sure, there's still food and eating and makeup, and people are unfamiliar with their infotainment systems and so on. But by far, it's the addiction to the cell phone. So
and that's the right word, our addiction. Our whole society doesn't know it. I shouldn't say we are all addicted to our cell phones, and most of us just don't realize it.
And it's so what we're hoping is that technology got us into this mess. We hope technology can help get us out of it. So I mean, a number of the basic tools that are already in everyone's cell phone, the do not disturb or focus mode, that blocks calls and texts and sends messages to the person sending you a text saying that you're driving and you'll respond later. Everyone should be using that. It's so easy to turn that on. For people that that have to stay connected, I mean, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, Google Automotive, but these things are great tools to be able to do voice commands and stay connected, but safely with your hands on the wheel and eyes on the road. And then there's a number of other technologies that you're certainly familiar with, but like the driver monitoring systems that are now in production on many vehicles, including the Escalade and the Lyric that I drive that have Super Cruise. This thing is watching my eyes, and if I look away for a period of time, it'll alert me, vibrate my seat, and eventually shut the car down from Super Cruise. So that's very robust technology. As you know, it's legislated in Europe now, so all new vehicles in Europe will require this for distracted and drowsy detection.
Yes.
So we're really lobbying, because I mentioned earlier, these state laws or the hands-free laws are state laws, so you got to do it 50 times, once in each state. But with things like driver monitoring systems, NHTSA could regulate that immediately. Yes. So we're lobbying hard to get the DOT and NHTSA to really get behind harmonizing the world and adopt what Europe has done, which is requiring these driver monitoring systems in all vehicles. With a little bit of with a camera and a little bit of artificial intelligence, you can do incredible things. I really applaud what the fleet owners have been doing, because the truckers and fleet providers, it's a little different, right? These drivers are their employees, so they can actually edict and tell them what they can and can't do. But when they put these driver monitoring systems in the car with a forward camera and a driver-facing camera, and tell them that there's zero tolerance. I was with the Walmart folks over the weekend, and their truckers, they have zero tolerance. If there's one alert that they were holding their phone or looking at their phone, they're dismissed from the company. So that changes behavior really quick. I mean, I wish we could do that with teenagers. I wish we could do it with all of our loved ones. But the fleets are really a good place to start. And let's face it, most of the miles driven out there are somehow commercial miles, right? So, we know we're having an impact there, and hopefully that will change the behavior across the whole population and the whole industry.
Yeah, I know when I was, working for Veoneer and we were developing the driver monitoring systems, the research that we saw showed that 90+% of accidents are caused by some sort of not paying attention, whether it's drowsiness, impairment, looking at your phone, talking to your spouse, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
That 95% of accidents could be prevented if eyes were on the road, hands were on the wheel.
Yeah.
And so that technology is so affordable and so good already. Really be great to see that come across the board. And one other thing I just wanted to mention here from a technology standpoint that I've seen coming as I've gone through recently with, last few years from 3 kids going on the insurance, that several insurance companies now are also saying, if you put this app in your phone and we can tell you're not picking up your phone, right? It can judge it. If they're picking up their phone while they're driving, then we'll give you a 30% discount.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because one of the first boards that I joined 1 year after I retired was the advisory board of Cambridge Mobile Telematics. Cambridge Mobile Telematics out of Cambridge or near Boston is a company that develops that safe driving app. And their app is actually the backbone of about, I think it's 22 of the top 25 insurance companies in the world. So when you see the Geico or Allstate or State Farm or Progressive apps that you just described, those are all branded by those companies. But the backbone of it is this Cambridge Mobile Telematics. And, as you mentioned, because I use that safe driving app, First of all, it's just amazing to me that you can get a 20 to 30% discount in your insurance, which is a pretty big bill these days, especially with young drivers. What's amazing to me is how low the penetration is. Right now, it's probably well less than 5% of the people that actually use these things and take advantage of that benefit. Cambridge, and I'm working with Cambridge to try to. It also
shows how serious the problem is. If it's a 20 to 30%, I mean, insurance companies know the costs, right?
Right.
So if it's a 20 to 30% discount, then they know the root cause of their costs, right?
That's right. And, it's interesting because you highlighted the word addiction. It's I always say that the safe driving app for me is also addicting, but in a positive way, because every time, when I think about, violating the speed limit or, getting too close and aggressively braking or, cornering, I just know it'll blow my score. So I'm really cautious to make sure I stay above a 90. And for me, it's more about the safe driving, but it's also an insurance benefit. There's a secondary benefit too with this company because I think the number is 25 million around the world. They have about 25 million users that are on that app. It may be more than that, but it's a large. It's in the tens. It might even be over closer to 100 million. It's probably 25, 30 million. Anyways, the point is, when you have all those people using the app, the telematics data, meaning the reports that they can generate, they can tell me, with a relatively small sample size, what the distraction rates are in any state, any city, any time of day. I mean, and then we can start putting some focused things in place. It's that data that showed us that in the 3 months following the Michigan law going into effect, the distractions dropped 12.7%. And that was really before they were even issuing many tickets. So this telematics data is so important because, as I go to a state legislator and say, do you know how bad and how dangerous this is? It's one thing for us to say it and just talk about the crashes and fatalities. But when you can show them reports that say, this is your district, this is what's happening, in your town, it really is quite compelling. So that's another reason why we want to get more people to use these apps. They get huge discount rates. People drive safer, and we have just
real data. You have the personal stories, but then you have the real data in order to show legislators to help get the rest of the states on board, and hopefully NHTSA as well before too long.
Yeah, exactly. So I think as I was talking, I got a little bit off on a tangent, but we do talk about 3 pillars. So awareness, just drive. Technology, we've just talked about a number of items, and then the third, of course, is the legislative piece, and that's really just trying to get these laws passed in every state. And as we always say, we're 29 down, and we're not going to stop till all 50 are done. And this kind of data and the support of lobbyists. As a matter of fact, we've got when I put the word out in some of these supplier events. We've got suppliers that have large plants and operations in every state in the country. So getting them on board to help with the legislative effort, because it's their people, it's their people's families in those states, and we just got to keep going until we get these done. The data says that about in each of the states where the laws have been passed, the crashes and fatalities tend to drop somewhere between 10 and 20%. Which is, it's not perfect, but I mean,
think about how long we've been working on highway fatalities. I mean, my whole career, right, has been in automotive safety, and how long we've been working on it, and haven't really. I mean, if you measure per mile, we made big progress. But if you measure in absolute fatalities, we really haven't made that much progress in 30 years, right? In the absolute fatalities in this country, let alone what's going on in the rest of the world, where it's a much bigger problem, quite frankly.
Right.
But
no, you're right. I was just looking at that data, and over the last 15 years, for all the hard, great work that we've been doing in highway safety, fatalities are up 20%. And I often draw this analogy. It might be interesting for your listeners. I mean, I come from a company that talks about zero crashes, zero emissions, zero congestion. And if I think about what the world is doing now for zero emissions, I mean, think about the 800 billion plus that we're spending to get
mind-boggling investments
and to maybe reduce the internal combustion engine new sales by 50% by the end of the decade. So I look at that, and then I say, what's the analogy to zero crashes? We talk about a road to zero for emissions. We also talk about a road to zero for crashes and fatalities. But if you take it over to the safety pillar, I don't want to say that nothing's being done, but it's not. I mean, it's a 20% increase. So this is not a road to zero. And there's a lot of things that could be done if we were serious about it. And again, I think it takes legislation. It takes federal and state level support. And then we've just got to, we got to get the behavior change, because it's just, it's definitely going the wrong way.
Well, kudos to you for really driving into this. And I think, I mean, from my perspective, the single one thing, you have a lot of pillars, but one thing that could make the biggest difference in this country is support for, driver monitoring, because that's very cheap technology. Could be, put in place by NHTSA. It's very affordable. It's not going to make cars, unaffordable for consumers, and it will make a huge impact, on driving. Like I drive across country quite a bit because I have this place in New Mexico, and I love the time with my kids. My 18-year-old at the time was 18-year-old. He's 20 now. He said, "Hey, Dad, let's just drive straight through. Let's not stop." And I said, "Okay, but here's the deal. Here's the deal. If we get a drowsiness warning, now we don't have the driver monitoring, but it has the lane centering, which has a drowsiness, component. I said, we get that one time, we stop, either of us, right? Then we stop and get a hotel and not drive straight through. So that technology, it makes a black and white thing where I might not even do that for myself driving during the day, because it just might be, enjoying the view or something. And then it tells me that. But I said, if we're doing it at night, then we're not gonna be one of those families that has a fell asleep behind the wheel and a death. No way. Yeah. And the technology is what can guarantee that we don't do that, right?
Yeah. Well, again, speaking of technology, and I mentioned earlier that the Mothers Against Drunk Drivers are a important and great partner of ours. But, many of your listeners probably don't know, and I got to admit, I didn't know it until MAD put out a press release. But as you probably know, as part of the Infrastructure Act that was passed a couple of years ago, there is a law in there, and it's law. It says all new vehicles by 2026 will have alcohol detection and disablement technology. And I mean, it's, we'll see if it actually meets that deadline. But the most of the systems that are out there include a breath sensor in the steering column, so you can measure that there's a presence of alcohol, and they're very sophisticated. They can sort out whether it's the driver or passengers. I just saw an outstanding demonstration. Actually, it was at CES in Vegas. Magna, who's a really strong partner of ours as well, has got a system that I would say is very robust and really ready for production. So alcohol detection with a blood alcohol sensor, and then it's accompanied by a visual. So it's got a driver monitoring system as well. And the false positives are really reduced when you start combining a couple of these technologies.
Right.
So
right.
And they've the system they showed me is really quite robust. I was skeptical a year ago, but when I saw this, and by the way, I saw something similar at Valio, and I hate to single out any suppliers because there were 2 or 3 or 4 others that are really promoting the technology as well. So I think this technology is ready, and we really need to push it hard to stick to that 2026 timeframe. Because again, if they do the alcohol detection, the driver monitoring comes along with it, and you can of course use the robust algorithms that already exist for drowsy detection and distracted. So hopefully we can keep the pressure on NHTSA through the legislators to make sure that this actually happens. It was really sponsored by our own Debbie Dingle from Michigan, who pushed this really hard on behalf of a family from my hometown of Northville, Michigan. This is a family of 5 that were killed by a wrong way driver who was drunk. And they've been on a crusade to basically get these laws changed. So there's a lot of technology out there that it's sometimes it can be a little controversial, but I mean it is so worth the effort if we could get this done. Imagine we could end impaired driving and distracted driving. To your point, we think that 94% of the crashes are due to some form of human error, and it's usually impaired, distracted, and speeding. I mean, you fix those things and then make sure everyone's wearing a seatbelt, you could bring fatalities down a ton. So we're really pushing for not only for this technology, but also to set some targets. I mean, one thing that you asked about some of the things I learned and some of the things that frustrate me. It frustrates me that I love the folks at NHTSA, but it frustrates me that they won't stand up, and even the administration won't stand up and say we will no longer tolerate this 20% increase in fatalities. By the end of the decade, we want to see a 20 or a 50% reduction in fatalities. And I tell you, like any problem, you and I are problem solvers. Like any problem we have out there, if you challenge the industry to do this, I could give you the white paper on how to do it. We could get this done easily by the end of the decade. We just have to have the commitment.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think listening to you, the 3 pillars you're focused on are absolutely right. And I think you're you're leading a societal transition, a social, moray and norms transition as a whole here, which I really applaud you for. I want to ask a question on your personal transition, Steve. Like, when it could have been so easy to go the other way, losing a son, like, I mean, a lot of people would fall apart in that situation. How did you decide to go the other way? What was going on in you? What are some things that maybe you could share with our listeners that can help, if someone's been in a tragedy, and this is maybe the worst tragedy I can imagine, losing a child, at that age. What did you notice? What did you learn that you might be able to share that would help people to take on a purpose path instead of a death spiral or a downward spiral at that point?
Yeah, it is very personal, but I'll go ahead and share it. I think I've said it in some videos, but I have a good friend who lost a daughter, actually, about a year or so before we lost Mitchell, 1 or 2 years before, I can't even remember now. And I watched it destroy his marriage, his career, alcoholism, and it was really just, and I think that happens to so many people. I mean, the grief is just overwhelming. To be quite honest with you, it scared me. It scared me that, I remember that month or two following, I even remember like the funeral, someone offering me a drink, and I'm like, I've never had an alcohol problem, but I was like, I want my mind and my brain to be perfectly clear here. And I don't want any chance to sort of, slip into depression. So I think it was probably seeing, the devastating effect, and you can see it all over, right? You see people that, lose loved ones, lose children, especially. It destroys marriages, it destroys, lives. So I was very aware of that, and we talked about it as a family, and just, as I said, and I think the video they recorded about a month after we lost Mitchell, I said, you can either let these tragedies destroy you or define you, and we decided that Mitchell was just too important to us to let this go without creating some legacy, something to honor his life. So yeah, that's really what probably motivated us. We know we don't want this death to go without some consequences or some benefits to society, and I think we're quite sure we're saving lives in Mitchell's honor.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I heard two things there. One is, to really be clear and remind yourself how badly it can go if you let yourself start to slide, right? To have that warning, if you will. But then the second thing that I heard there that I think is really important for people going through transition is connect with people around you that you love, and listen to them and serve them as well, right? You have other kids that you needed to be dad for as well, right? But to really connect with people around you that's a big part of any transition, I think, is really important to connect with those around you that you love. And then I like that as far as looking at the honest fact, brutally, the brutal facts of what can happen if you let yourself start to slide as well, to have that warning to buffer you against. So,
maybe the third thing, because I still remember one of my good friends, his comment to me, at the funeral was, I think he's an ex-military guy. He said, "Steve, don't try to land this plane alone." And I think, I seldom have a discussion like this that doesn't end with somebody saying, "What can I do to help?" And actually, it's one of our biggest challenges. How do you take these, it's thousands, maybe it's tens of thousands of offers that I've had for, "Hey, I want to help you." And how do you channel that offer to help into something that actually will help? But the thing I would just, remind everybody is, when you've got an important cause and you've convinced people that it is important, it's amazing how many people want to help. And you got to take advantage of that help. Never try to do it alone. I mean, there's so many cases now, and you look at what's gone. We didn't have COVID when this started, and living through COVID, and looking at the impact on mental health for people. I mean, there's I'm really pleased that no longer has the stigma that it probably had even 5-6 years ago. I mean, it's okay to say that you need help, and you're depressed, or you're alone, or you don't know where you're going on this. There are people out there that are willing to help, whether it's with mental health or with an important cause that's going to save lives.
Yeah, I was listening to the Surgeon General recently. He was saying that loneliness, he feels, is the number one epidemic we have now. That 1 in 2 people in this country don't have one person that they feel they could call in the middle of the night.
Wow.
When they were suffering, right? And so that's to be able to speak up and acknowledge it. I went through a big one, man, 2020 and 2021, where I realized I was being run by anxiety and fear, and it was out of control. and
Yeah.
that was really tough. But I did those things. Luckily, I had a strong wife and kids and community,
Yeah.
and I was willing to say I'm not okay and I need help,
Yeah.
and that really makes a big difference. I think there's a lot of people that still don't feel like that's okay, but you're right. It is a lot better today, I think, than it was before, and a lot more. Again, talking about social mores and norms, it's now okay to say I'm not okay in that aspect too, not just physically, which
Yeah.
is just as important and affects the physical as well. I'm I'm wondering if you look back now, Steve, on this transition, which I almost don't separate between, your retirement, which is obviously a big transition on its own, moving on to purpose, and losing a son, which was maybe the start of that new purpose, or not maybe, was clearly. Is there something you would do differently? Is there something that you would tell your, whether it's 7-year-old or 7 years ago, 7-year younger or 15-year younger self? Is there something you would, if with the wisdom that you have now looking back, is there something you would tell your younger self to make this transition even better or more effective, or anything you would do differently?
Yeah, it's a good question. One thing that I think I'm much more aware of now, because there's thousands of people like me that have gone through some horrible tragedy and then have dedicated themselves to fixing it. I probably wasn't as aware. I mean, I think I was always empathetic, but not to the point where I could really put myself in that position. Where I've got a friend whose daughter was died due to fentanyl overdose, and I think about probably 7 years ago I would have thought, oh my God, that's horrible. I'm empathetic. What can I do for you? But I'm much deeper in those thoughts now, because I mean, there's so many good, important causes out there. So I probably, if I looked back at that, I probably would have, I would advise myself to try to put yourself in that position and really think about, what you can do differently to help. I use the fentanyl example. I mean, I never even thought to talk to kids about fentanyl 6-7 years ago. It wasn't quite as bad as it is today. But yeah, I think that's probably one thing. And the reason I say that is because I'm hoping that with us talking about this and me telling my story, I'm hoping that I always try to find a way to say, I want you to connect to it like you lost your child and do something about it so that you don't have to lose your child. I think that's the main takeaway is, don't wait till something terrible happens in any of these issues, whether it's mental health or fentanyl or, gun safety or, distracted or impaired driving, or drug abuse, whatever. Don't wait until, you've lost somebody. Really think about, what you could do differently before that happens.
No, that's a great point. And I guess a follow-up question on that. What's the one thing for the primary mission you're on, but it could be something else too. What's the one thing that you feel that others could do to support? Like in my family right now, with all the expertise you have around ending distracted driving, what is the one thing that you think I could do to make the biggest difference? And therefore all of our listeners, like what's the one thing that you would say? Is it, put down your own phone, be an example? Is it, like what is the one thing that you feel like with all of our listeners did themselves or in their immediate circle of friends and family that would make the biggest difference toward not having someone else get the call that you got, Steve?
Yeah. So I always start out with the simplest phrase, which is when you're behind the wheel, put your phones down and just drive. I think if everybody, and I know we spend a lot of time on that simple phrase and that simple logo, but if everybody could just get their head around, when I'm in the car, that's all I'm really focused on is driving the car. I mean, that would already, I mean, truly, if everyone did that, that would solve a lot of the problems. But then I usually kind of have a continuum that I go down after that, because then second, I would say, turn on the tools that are already available. Turn on the focus mode, turn on do not disturb, safe drive mode on Androids, and make sure that the message is getting out there that you're not going to accept a text or a phone call while you're driving. That is powerful for you as a safe driver, but it's equally powerful for the person that receives the message. I remember the first time I received it, because Androids had these even before Apple did. And I can remember I still remember it was my brother-in-law at the end of 2016. I sent him a text and it came back, "Sorry, I can't respond. I'm driving." And I thought, yeah, why doesn't everybody have that? So that's probably number two. Then is personal accountability on the technology that's available. Again, if you have to be connected, we prefer that you're not. But if you have to be connected, and Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, Google Automotive. These things all make it really easy to stay connected and still be safe. And I would put all those things in the first category of personal accountability. Do it yourself, and then make sure all your loved ones are doing the same, and we'd be in a much better place. And then if you're really anxious to do more, I think go to our website, mkiefer.org. You'll see a number of things that people can do to volunteer and support. But I would say become an advocate. Help sponsor some of these safe driving programs. I was just in one with our partner Brakes over this past weekend down here in Southwest Florida. 2 full days. These people, by the way, have educated now 130,000 teens and parents on safe driving skills. It's really incredible. So shout out to the Brakes organization, and they're taking since I've been working with them. I mean, they've taken this all over the country. They've got 3 fleets of vehicles now that they're doing this all over the country. It's really having a positive impact. People can sponsor them. People can I know General Motors gave them a grant and hosted several of these classes in towns where General Motors had facilities, and it really helped make the young drivers safer. And then also helping us fight for legislation, whether it's the NHTSA example I gave earlier, to make sure that all new vehicles have driver monitoring systems in it, and of course all of the advanced emergency braking systems and so on that are currently available. And then or if it's advocating at the state level to make sure you get these laws passed. And we often say that once the laws pass, it's a good start, but if you don't have awareness campaigns and enforcement campaigns, it declines really quickly. They just slip. So we got to make sure that we support our law enforcement to make sure they have the tools and the resources to actually enforce these laws.
Right. So first starts with our own personal accountability. Just drive ourselves and those around us, right? And then, starting at your website, there's a lot of other ways that we can get involved. I was just thinking for myself, they have this great driver training at my high school here, but I'll write to the principal and say, hey, here's a website that can be a great, partner with you in this, and use this in your training, right? That you're doing for all the high schools all the high school students that want to get a parking pass at this high school, right? That they're training. And
no, I love that example. It's just to put some things in perspective, I'm in Florida now, and we're working hard to get hands-free Florida passed. I think Florida is one of the most dangerous states I've ever driven in. 3,400 people were killed last year in the roads of Florida, and we still have opposition to get these laws put in place.
10% of the deaths in the United States are in one state. Wow.
It's really, and it's
with no snow or anything else. I mean, it's
right. There's just this huge influx because everybody seems to love Florida these days. It's paradise. It's great, but it's crowded, and there's just a lot of bad behavior on the roads. So, and we're struggling. I mean, we got legislators that have illogical arguments as to why they don't want to do this, and I won't even get into them. But it's heartbreaking, because I usually say to the legislator, okay, if you don't like my idea, what is your idea? Because you can't just allow 3,400 people to get killed every year and say, well, we're not going to do anything about it. Right. So let's do something. And there's a number of things we could be doing. I learned actually just when I was at the safe driving class down here that drivers in Florida, they take their driver's education online, and there's no time with a professional instructor. Like when I grew up, you had weeks of driving. So they rely on the parents to spend time in the car teaching the kids, and even the parents are saying, some are saying, I'm really not qualified to teach, but I can try. And then some are saying, I'm afraid to drive with my
kid behind the wheel.
How are we going to get them capable? Because we got
and you don't have the brake. Driver's ed cars always have the brake on the other side, right?
Yeah.
The instructor can take over.
I mean, I was shocked.
That's amazing. I mean,
when I learned, so the class was inundated with people that were like so thankful that they could learn these safe driving skills behind the wheel of a real car with a professional driver, and they teach them, anti-lock brakes. They teach them how to correct from a rear wheel slide. They teach them how to handle when you drop 2 wheels off the road, which by the way is the
very
number
common.
one cause of fatalities, right? It's
because then you come back on too fast and
either overcorrect and go into oncoming traffic, or hit the brakes and go into a tree.
Hit a tree,
and, they're very simple skills of just let off the throttle, get to a safe speed, ease back, and they make them do it time and time again.
Man, that's awesome.
It's really, they keep data on this, and all of their graduates are, statistically much better drivers than the general population. So those are just a few examples that, we can, whether it's the brakes program or the dozens of others that are out there, but, getting young drivers educated on, how to drive safely. And, if they could turn on the Safe Drive app and get a 20 to 30% discount on their insurance and get addicted to driving safely,
right,
that would even be better.
That's awesome. Well, I really appreciate all those ways that we can follow up and support the cause on a personal way, right, with all the listeners. And I really encourage you to do so that you don't have to go through what Steve's had to go through. I have one final question, because we've already covered the final question, which is where they can find out more about you and follow the cause. But if you think about the transitions you've been through in your life as a whole, right, and you've got a lot of wisdom and experience now, you've been through a lot of heartbreak, which also generates a lot of wisdom usually. If you could give one tool to our listeners about how to make the most out of transitions in life, what would that be? What would be, if you could take, I'm an action-oriented guy like yourself, like one thing that people actually can take with them. We've covered the cause, and I hope that everyone will do that right now too, to go set their phone up and turn on their app and be the example of just drive. But in transitions in life as a whole, what would you say, from what you've been through in your whole life, what is the one thing that you've learned that can make transitions go in the right direction or make the most of the transitions that you're given?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And, as you were asking the question, I was thinking that, a lot of transitions I've been through, I've been thrown into positions, that I knew nothing about. I, by the way, never worked in purchasing or supply chain. I wasn't educated in that. And then one day, the CEO
of the biggest automotive company
run the whole department. So, what I've always done, and I did it then, and I even do it today, is maybe it's a simple message, but defining your mission very clearly. And the way I try to do it very clearly is I usually try to say, what do I want to be able to say 1 year from now? Because I'm very results oriented. Yeah. So I'm starting this, on February 1st or whatever the day is, and I'm saying, what would be a perfect scorecard on February 1st of 2025? And what are the, it helps me say, there's a lot of busy work I can do. There's a lot of things I can do. But at the end of the year, when I want to say we accomplished 4 more states, or we saved $2 billion in material costs at General Motors, I mean, some very clear, simple targets that become your North Star, and everything you do is sort of, you try to find a way that it's aligned to get those results. So it's probably my nature is sort of very results oriented, but that's always helped me because it, we all get disturbed by a lot of things, a lot of distractions, even outside the car. Sure. Things will pull us in all kinds of directions. If you can really crystallize and say, the things I'm going to focus on are the ones that are going to, reduce fatalities next year by 5% or 10%. I mean, those are the kinds of things. And that's why I'm so adamant that I would love, frankly, I would love the administration. I would love, Secretary Buttigieg from the Department of Transportation to stand up and say, in my term, we're going to bring fatalities down by X%. I mean, as you know, setting real stretch goals, even if you miss them, are a good way to get things going in the right direction.
Absolutely. No,
set goals and really think about, and I say 1 year. I mean, I don't think everything's, I always kind of broke my mind up into short, medium, and long. So for me, short was, what do I got to do to finish the quarter strong? Medium was, what do I got to do to finish the year strong? And long was, what does it look like 5 years from now? So I'd be remiss if I didn't say, having a goal of, all the states are done within 5 years. I mean, that's a pretty good goal. And it's one that we have. I mean, I don't see any reason why. There's going to be a point here, a tipping point, I'm sure, that it's going to be very easy to say, listen, 35 states have this done. Why are you holding out Florida? It's, fatalities. We know we can save lives. Get on with it. So
No, I love what you're saying though, and I think about how that can apply to a lot of transitions. Like, if I paraphrase, it's Stephen Covey, right? But begin with the end in mind. Like, where do I want to be? So I have a crisis in my life. I've lost the son, or I've lost the spouse. Where do I want to be 5 years from now? Even in that situation, getting a new job that you don't have any experience in. Okay, where do I want to be 1 year from now? And and then to focus on those things that you can control, right? And driving that. So I think that's really useful, Steve. I really appreciate you being on here today. I really appreciate you being so open and vulnerable about your personal experience. And I know that's a big part of your success in driving this mission that you have now in the second half of life. I don't even want to call it retirement. It's the second half of life. And it's a very important part of life. I mean, with us that have made it to, 50, 60 years old, we're, even for men, that life expectancy is 81 now, if you've made it to that age. Right. And so we have another 25 or 30 years to benefit society in ways that are really purposeful and important to us. So I really, really appreciate it. I really appreciate the work that you're doing. It's made me different. I'm still not perfect, and it's made me different. It's helped with my kids a lot. Like, as I said, they are really clear when, right after you publish those signs and so forth, we had those, all of our parties, we're handing those out at our house. Our kids are more ingrained. I hate to say it, they're more ingrained than me now about that, because I sort of grew up on, like you, on my phone and driving, and it's totally unacceptable. And all three of my kids to touch your phone while you're driving. And so I really appreciate the work that you're doing. Maybe one of the kids that you've saved is mine, and I appreciate that. So thank you for being with me today. And I really, really enjoyed and appreciate the conversation.
Great. Well, thanks so much for giving me the opportunity to tell the story, and thank you for making it so easy to have this conversation. It was a great time spent with you, and always great to see Art. Thank you for everything you're doing to try to get the word out.
Thanks a lot, Steve. I can't wait to hear what action you are taking. Connect with me on LinkedIn or our website, lifeintransition.online, and let me know. Let a friend know too. It could be a huge encouragement to them and keep you on the track. Thank you so much for joining me today. Make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and it would mean a lot to me if you left a review and shared this episode with a friend. If you want to learn more about me and what I do when I'm not podcasting, please visit me at artblanchford.com. Thank you for listening. Together, let's make the most of life in transition.